Hello everyone, and welcome to this speed run video, which I've kind of changed the format a little bit since the last one, hopefully to make it a bit more educational. And we're going to be playing on LiChess, and we're going to try to make our rating rise in stages. And I'm starting now at 1600 strength, 1599, as we're going to see here, and we're going to see how we can get it up. So this might be very useful for those of you around this rating, and I think also to much higher rated players, because I'm going to give you my grandmaster opinion of basically what you should be doing, and the typical mistakes mainly that our opponents at certain rated ranges are doing, and how you can avoid those mistakes. So let's go straight into a game, and we'll try to get a game. So we're playing a 1606. So this is the rating range we're really concentrating on. So we'll start with a 3-minute game. Maybe we'll go to 5-minute after this. I'm going to play the Dutch, and my opponent's playing bishop f4. So already I can kind of tell he's going to go for a London system setup. So I'm expecting he's going to go e3, knight here, bishop d3, knight here, c3. And then it'll be very interesting to know after those moves, which is probably read somewhere, if he knows what to do next. So he's gone e3. I'm going to do the Dutch in this game, and my setup is just to get my pieces out. Let's see if he continues with his setup. And this is one thing that's very important to everyone. You know, whatever rating range you're at, you learn your first sequence of moves, but it's like what you then doing with those pieces. So my moves, well, I'm going to put the bishop here. Okay, well, he's played a very aggressive g4 move there. Is this a bit of premature calculation again? I saw there was a lot of comments on that last time. Maybe a lot of sufferers out there. My heart goes out to you guys. And I don't think so. This is actually not a bad setup against the Dutch. But I'm going to now develop a bishop with tempo. And in order to play this way, you've got to play very energetically. And this already seems a little bit strange, because why didn't he develop his knight? It's not a good place for the rook. And I'm going to continue now with a little bit more urgency. First of all, let's move the bishop out. I want to exchange off his only active piece, so we get that off. And now I have two developed pieces. My pawn structure, maybe not ideal here, but I'm aiming on my development. So he's playing very sensible, but I'm going to try offering that pawn on f5 with the idea of going knight e4 and getting some compensation. He didn't even think about taking it. He moved very quickly there. And he's still playing very decent chess at the moment for his rating. So let's put the knight in the center of the board. This is all pretty normal stuff. Now that move is the kind of move you always play in the London system, right? But that is one of those artificial moves, because what does it actually do here? It doesn't do anything in this position, I feel. You've got to avoid playing moves unless you can really define the reasoning behind them. And this move, well, queen c2, I just don't feel is right, because he's going to put his king here and he's lining up more pieces on this diagonal. So I'm wondering now if I can play rook here with the idea of knight b4, and let's see if he spots my idea. Generally at this rating level, players don't see your idea more, and he's done well. Actually, this move queen b3 check, I've just noticed, might be a savior. So we'll move out the way, and we really are now telegraphing this one, and you really don't want to lose your bishop here. Okay, so he has so far maybe seen it. Let's see. We'll move the knight into the square. I've got to move a bit quicker here, actually. I'll make it a 5-minute game after this one. Let's make sure we win this one first of all. And he's playing all right. He's playing much, I would say, much better than his rating here. And, well, maybe the position is reasonably even. He's seeing my threats. This is very good. He's seeing what my ideas are. He's dealing with them. And I'm now going to try and just get an attack going over here. His queen seemed to have found itself in a very uncomfortable situation, and you can see this rook h2 move early on. Little moves like this can be really, like, I should have gone check there. They can be really real major problems. And if he could go rook c1 now, he'd be okay, but it's just little misplacement of pieces when he could have gone knight f3 can really come back to haunt you. So you know, you really should always try to find the most active way of doing things. And now, well, I can win his queen here with bishop c6, and this should be good enough to zoom through, because we're going to win the knight as well after this forced sequence of king a3, queen c1 check, and there we go. So yeah, going to that game, I'll make it a 5-minute game. I actually think his idea of h3 and then g4 is quite a nice idea. There's nothing wrong with playing actively, and again, premature attaculation. I don't think this is the case of that, because I have played this f5 move, which a lot of people feel is flamboyant. It's a Dutch defense, but a lot of people still feel it's flamboyant. But his real mistake came immediately after this one. There's nothing wrong with knight f3. Your rook wants to go to g1. Misplacing this rook, even though it doesn't seem like a big deal, it seems to me to be a real problem. And then the other thing I think that he didn't do particularly well, he should have considered taking that pawn, even if I get a bit of initiative, and playing this move c3. And again, maybe this is not a bad move, but to me it's the kind of setup in the London system. You play your same moves against every setup your opponent does, but chess, one of the most important things is to be adaptable, as we've seen before. Okay, so we're above 2600 now, and let's go and play. We'll go 5 minutes so I can explain the ideas a lot more. So 5 minutes, both 16:08. I've got black again. Now, I know a lot of you are asking for me to play various openings, that I've covered in previous things. Okay, so yet again we get the London system so popular at this thing. So I'm going to play knight d5, and again you can see my opponent has just pre-moved. It's amazing how many people do this. So one thing you can do at this, is try to cause some problems, and immediately. And this is just that, they're going to play their same moves against everything. They're not looking at what their opponent does. And I already feel after I take here, I've got the bishop pair. My opponent's got double pawns. It's not that much worse for him, but it's not ideal. Okay, he's got an open e-file, but so what? So I'm thinking now, do I fianchetto this bishop? And I think that looks quite logical, because this pawn can't be supported by e3. So what I'm thinking of doing is trying to hit that pawn with c5. And normally he'd want to play e3 to defend it and opening up the range of my bishop here. So he's playing his normal London system moves. I'm going to play this anyway. It's partly a pawn sacrifice. And now I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to try to get the bishop pair, get quite a unique position. Now this move to me, it is very hard to understand. His one advantage is his extra pawn. If he wanted to do anything, taking the knight and going b4, you want to try to play the most critical moves always in chess. And here I don't just win my pawn back, but I win my pawn back and I improve my pawn structure, because now I've got lots of nice pawns in the center of the board. I've got the bishop pair, so it's very small positional advantages here. Okay, so I'm gonna put my rook on an open line. I'm just playing very logical moves. I'm not trying to play any long combinations at this level. I'm just trying to put pieces on good squares. So again, thinking logically, castles is okay, but again, that's one of those moves where you want to try to find the weaknesses in your opponent's position. And here it kind of thinks that if he plays knight f3 without thinking, then I could, and I want to get a bishop to this diagonal to stop him castling. So I'm going to move my knight somewhere a bit central, and if he plays without thinking, again, a major mistake. He's not thinking what I'm trying to do, and after bishop here, he's in a lot of trouble because he can't castle. If the knight was on e2, which my opponent should have played, he should be able to castle, but he's walking straight into my ideas. And now, well, I can bring the knight in. I can go rook takes b2, queen takes knight here. That's quite a nice tactic. Let's play that one. Again, when I'm saying we're not doing long combinations, we're doing mini tactics, but only based from very good positions. That's what I'm trying to do, and a 13 move win there. So what did my opponent do wrong there? Well, of course, this moving instantaneous in the opening, not looking at your opponent's ideas. I mean, even if you're pretty sure what you're going to do, you should be thinking, well, my opponent's playing, is he going to go for a G6 setup? What do I do against that? I do a different, I plan against that in the middle game. Then if he goes for a D5 setup, if he goes for a D5 setup, what is my middle game plan? You should be thinking of the middle game. And you know what? Sometimes even the ending. What kind of pawn structure do I want in the ending? This is something else you can do. And later on, well, we had this big mistake. I think this is all right. C6, the first mistake. Why give a pawn back? You're making my life extremely easy here. And you played this, you have 4 minutes on your clock, you're not using your time. If you lose a game of chess, a 5-minute game, you still got 4 minutes on your clock. You're obviously doing something really wrong. You're moving too quickly. You should be losing games with not much time on your clock. And here, after this standard idea, again, have a look. What am I trying to do? Well, what are the weaknesses here? And I already saw that the weaknesses are kind of because he hasn't got any pawns in the middle, these squares. So if I get my bishop here, which I did, I think I'm just winning already here. There's no good way to stop this one. C4, rook takes b2. And he should have played at least knight to e2 here, because then bishop a6 he can castle. The game goes on. So let's try to play another game. And I think I'll keep these videos like half an hour each. And now my rating seems to have stabilized at a bit of a low level. We're going to try and build it up bit by bit. Okay, so I'm going to play e4. And again, let's just think what my strategy is in this game. Well, I'm going to go with my Grandmaster Gambit's Chessable course, which I'm very proud of. The course I did alongside Richard Palliser. And that one we continue with knight to f3. And we continue with bishop c4, and some of the ideas involve hitting this pawn. After this, which is a very popular, well, the most popular reply at R level and top level, we castle. And after the standard reply, knight to f6, we play this gambit move, pawn to d4. Now, a horrible move. Now, this is an overly safe move. This is one of those. This fits into the category of unnecessary pawn move. But not just that, but a pawn move that creates horrible weaknesses. You should got to be looking at your opponent's pieces, and this move f6 is allowing the range of my bishop to simply increase, meaning black cannot castle now. It's also taking away a development square for the knight. So this f6 move I can see being a real start to a lot of black's problems. Black needed to develop the knight, and again at this level it shows that Catherine hasn't got that basic opening knowledge that you need to have, but you need to be thinking, why am I playing each move? You know, be able to verbally explain to yourself, why am I playing f6? And this is another thing that a lot of players suffer from, being too defensive. The only idea of this move can be a defensive idea, but you don't need to be defensive here. You need to do other principles, develop your pieces. So I'm going to be thinking, okay, well now I want to open up the position because my opponent can't castle, so I want to try to get to the king. So knight c3 I feel it is not right, because how am I going to open up the position? When you want to open up the position, use pawn levers. Now d4 is some interesting pawn sack, but I don't see anything wrong here with just playing c3, because when I played d4 we're certainly opening up the position, which I'm going to do now. And of course my opponent might think that she's very solid here, but the fact is the king is on e8. This is, in my eyes, another mistake. That pawn was very well defended, a bit like in the London system. You think the same structure, and that pawn would at least kept me at bay. That kind of Spartan pawn, it blocks everything coming on. But now after this one, without that pawn, I have ideas of e5, and again my strategy is very simple. I'm come through, but I don't want to suffer from that premature attaculation. So e5, pawn takes. We've got to base all our ideas in calculation, and after d takes, I don't want to swap queens off, so I don't need to play this. Now, what is my opponent trying to do? So knight c3 would be a good developing move, but if we look a little bit deeper in this position, I think this is where Grandmaster strategy comes in. You can see that, well, even if knight here, my opponent can't castle. Now, what about, so I can't stop my opponent moving the knight there, but what could be the only weakness in my position? Potentially d4. I don't want to move that pawn on because it'll block my bishop. Don't block your own pieces. That's a fantastic piece. But the only way my opponent can get some counterplay would be bishop g4, pinning my knight. And this is, I think, my next move. Maybe if you saw my first video, you might get this. I think this is a really nice move here, because we're frustrating our opponent. This is, again, to play moves like this is quite high level. I think well above the 1600 range. You have to be in that frustrating your opponent mood. Now, this move, it's maybe not doing anything. G6 is weak. I'll simply develop. I don't believe this is going to work. I can just win the piece without a queen being able to come to h4. Another problem with the f6 pawn, it simply cannot work. And now what does my opponent try and do next? Well, again, I can't really see, so I'm just going to play rook e1. And the way I'm playing this, I'm improving my pieces, but I'm just thinking, what's my opponent's next move? And I'm trying to put myself in black's shoes. Black can't castle. Black now can't move this bishop to any good square. Bishop d7 is making the position even worse. This knight can't do anything annoying. If it goes here, it's sidetracked. I can move my bishop away. The bishop here is doing nothing, and my opponent hasn't really got any moves. So rather than force the issue in this situation, what I'm actually preferring doing, because my opponent doesn't have any constructive moves, I'm just doing moves that are going to be useful, getting behind the pawn, getting ready, and I'm just doing moves where I'm actually making it very hard. And you can see my opponent has now lashed out. And don't be scared if your opponent plays some move which looks very aggressive. You should always keep your calm, and you should always think, well, you know, can I play the most critical move? Can I take that piece and win a piece? If I can take the piece and win a piece, I will. Now, is there anything I'm worried about? Well, I'd rather stop the queen coming in. I'm simply going to defend that one. And here, I think, because of the way I played this, I've kind of tempted my opponent into playing an unsound sacrifice. So maybe we have to watch out for a little bit of the pawn coming down. I don't need to do anything crazy. I'm just gonna get ready for g5 coming. Okay, f5, not so worried about. Now I get the g5 square. Whenever your opponent plays a pawn move, look at squares that pawn move weakens. This move weakened immediately g5, so my eyes are certainly going to g5, and I'm thinking, well, with this knight on this square, I have two more ways I can win material. Bishop e6, knight f7. So I'm just going to move my knight in there. I think my opponent had to try g5, g4 there, but the point of my play then was that my knight there could at least move away from g4, and I want to keep the files closed. Now this one, I can take that one, but what's better than a rook? A queen. So we're just going to dive in to e6 and bag ourselves a queen in the position. Look at those weakened squares. Weakened squares, the light squares, keep your eye on those weakened squares. See if you can use those weakened squares. See if you can get your pieces into those weakened squares. And remember, don't relax when you material up. And whenever your opponent plays a move, is there any threat? No, I don't think so, because my opponent takes there. I'm very happy to take back with a pawn. Okay, I'm going to recapture material where I can. Knight takes e4. And we're not relaxing. We're thinking still actively. Just because we won the queen, just because we won a lot of material, it's not time to be like, okay, the game's going to win itself. That is just the biggest mistake that you can ever make. Now, I want to clear off my queen, get my rooks, and I want to create a threat. I still want to keep the pressure up, even though I'm material up. I don't want to go defensive because I'm material up. I don't want to start playing negatively because I'm material up. I've got to still play positively, but be very careful when you move your queens out. My opponent can't take here. I've got two pieces to defend that one. I'm very, very happy with any exchanges. The more exchanges that get swapped off, the bigger my winning advantage is. And I have some nice knights in the middle. And here, well, my opponent is simply dropping pieces all over the shop. Loose pieces drop off. Whenever you move a piece to a square, make sure it's not going to be captured. Okay, so let's now go for, I think, my killer d4. So we're going to play lines from my killer d4 course. That's on GingerGM.com. You can check that out. We're into a Slav. And I'm just going to play the opening moves, which I think most people play. Now, this is a little bit irregular. The bishop doesn't normally come out before the knights, and normally you want to move your knights out. So if your opponent plays an irregular move in the opening, what am I thinking? I'm thinking, well, that move's not really something in, you know, I'm not used to this move. So is there a reason why top players don't play a move like that. So what are the downsides of playing that? And you can see straight away that one of the downsides is you lose the protection of b7. So I'm going to go for a very simple strategy. I'm going to take this pawn on d5, and I'm going to try to play queen b3, and this is trying to take advantage of my opponent's irregular opening move. So if you see an irregular opening move, what are the weaknesses behind that? There's probably a reason that Magnus Carlsen's not playing it, the top players are not playing it, that I haven't seen it before. And if you find out afterwards that one way you should really use your blitz games is you should, if you go to GChess, this new site I've created, you can check your blitz games on GChess, and you can check them against the top games and see if these irregular ideas have actually been played. So my opponent has played a good move. He's going for the most active solution. He's trying to get the knight in, some counter attack. Now if I take on b7, let's have a look at that one first. And you've got to calculate. Knight takes d4 looks a little bit scary there, but can I play queen takes, knight takes, and some crazy move like e4? Now this is where it gets quite complicated, because if knight check, king here, you know what, it's too complicated for a blitz game. And it looked like my idea was good, but I've still got these things. The one move my opponent's relying on is this. So how am I going to defend that threat? By developing a piece. Defend the mini threat, keep my threats alive, but cut out on my opponent's threats. And I've got these ideas now which my opponent has to defend. So okay, so now I can take this pawn, and I feel I will grab that pawn. My opponent's played this actually quite well. My opponent's finding ways that maybe he can get some counterplay at some point. Now this move I don't really believe, because it's going to be too weak along here. I would have thought knight e7 and rook b8 is the way to play, but again, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to play the most critical moves. Like I'm saying, if I suddenly became a bit of a wimp and didn't capture on b7, it would be like, why have I done this plan? I'm going to play the most critical moves, always. So I'd like to play e3, but maybe I don't want to block my bishop in, so I'm going to move my bishop out. If f6, I'm thinking, well, I've taken away a square from my opponent's knight, and I'm just trying to get the maximum out of my position. So by this, it's a little bit risky when my queen's off doing stuff, but by playing in this way, I'm trying to swap some pieces off, and I want to play this e3, but now I've just realized takes, e3, rook b8. The queen moves, rook takes here. Okay, I've still got bishop b5 with a pin. So again, calculation is obviously very key. And now I'm going to play this move, and after castling, I'm now thinking, well, my queen is a little bit weak, right? But this is actually, actually this is not so clear now. Even though I've played the most critical line, I'm a little bit scared, because if my opponent flies rook b8 and knight in, it's like, ooh, hang on a minute, that's getting a little bit spicy. So what I'm going to have to do now, I would like to try and hold on to this pawn, but if I start playing like queen here, rook b8, and move my queen, then knight b4 coming into c2 is bad. So there is a point when you've got to really notice a sense of danger. And my sense of danger is, okay, well look, my opponent is, oh shit, I've allowed this one. Why did I do that? My sense of danger was, this is a terrible game from me. And my opponent didn't see it. My opponent, this is a case where you see a good move, look for a better move. I was hoping my opponent would play this way, when at least after castles now, yeah, okay, my opponent's got the pawn back, but there was this knight b4 and knight c2, and I must admit after that one, I've played this where I've gone wrong early on in the opening. So it'd be interesting to see where I go wrong. We'll put this on the analysis afterwards. And one thing I would say you should always do, and it happens to me all the time, if there's something that's gone wrong in one of your games, I'm going to play queen a3. My queen was attacked. I want to play aggressively as I can. And I don't think now this knight b4, it seemed like one of those artificial moves. Why there? You really going into c2? I don't think the knight was. My rook could always move. This looks like a good active move, but in actual fact, it's a one mover. There's a difference between good threats and bad threats, and what I mean by that is another thing I find a lot of weaker players doing. They do bad threats. They do one move artificial threats, artificial moves. They attack their opponent's queen. but they're not thinking, well, if my opponent moves the queen, does it help my position or not? And there's no point just trying to attack the queen. And okay, there's a couple of moves here. I can take here, or knight takes here and go a pawn up in the ending. This one is trying to trap the rook. The rook is attacked by the knight. Can I trap it? Here, here, knight here, traps the rook. So this one seems a bigger material game. And so bad threats is when someone like creates a threat. You attack your opponent's queen, but you're only doing it hoping that they're not going to see the queen goes away. Always assume, big mistake, always assume that your opponent's going to play the best move. Never assume your opponent's going to miss a threat, that you're going to get a trap in. Playing in that way is just really bad. Always assume your opponent is going to play the best move. So cheap threats where you attack your opponent's queen, but your opponent can move the queen and maybe improve their position, or you've put your knight on a bad square. Cheap threats are bad. And what I mean by good threats, a little combination here that we're just going to unleash the queen. What I mean by good threats is you play a threat where you attack your opponent's position, but it improves. Let's say they're going to play the best move. Somehow you've improved your position. So maybe you attacked their queen with your knight, but you've brought your knight to a better square. So make sure you know the difference between good threats and bad threats. There is a big difference. Don't just play one movers where if your opponent sees the right move, it improves their position. You've got to always be trying to improve your position. Trappy ideas, they don't really work. You know, the way I play, and a lot of people think I play quite trappily, but that's just not true. I attack a lot, and I play quite practical by putting pressure on my opponent by my attacking play. But my play is often, I'm doing things which are very, very natural. So I'm playing moves which are improving my pieces, that are going forwards, that are trying to really isolate weaknesses in my opponent's position. I'm playing these kind of ideas. Okay, so now I'm the exchange and a pawn up. So one thing I'm very happy to do is to exchange rooks off. And when you're material up, the easiest way to win is to exchange pieces off. So rook here, very happy to see. This exchange helps me. I just want to exchange off. My opponent has spotted the back rank idea. Now I'm going to go knight here. Whenever your opponent plays a move, try to work out what their idea is. My idea is e4, winning the piece. So look at your opponent's move, and you've got to think, what are they trying to do with that one? And what are all the squares that knight is now sort of attacking that it wasn't before? And if you highlight all these squares, you will see. So my opponent hasn't fallen into this one, but again, this move is one of those moves where, well, why there? What's the knight doing there? In actual fact, you're walking into the line of a rook, and the knight didn't have any point on moving to that square. So another artificial move, and we're going to try to punish that artificial move by simply putting our rook on the same line as the knight and queen. And these tactical motives, you know, you can always work on your tactical motives. Make sure you do, and make sure you have an idea of what tactical motives you're trying to achieve. And now just a3. The more tactical puzzles you do, the quicker you'll spot knight and queen on the same file, rook pinning them. Back rank checkmate, let's get a rook down to the back rank. These are quite basic ones, but the same goes for much more complicated ones. The more puzzles you can do, the more complex of tactics you'll be able to work out. So we're gonna, I think, just leave it here. Like we say, we're gonna take the speed run a bit slower. So we're gaining now, we've gained like 30-40 points through the 1600 stages. I think I will, just do a little rundown of what I think some of the classical mistakes, the big mistakes my opponents are making in the 1600 range. Maybe if you're in the 1600 range, this is the kind of mistakes you're doing. So I'm going to go over to this website which me and a bunch of other people have created called GChess. So if you're interested to see, if you're really serious about getting better at chess, I will now show you how you can use GChess to analyze your own games and improve. But for example, in this game, my opponent played very well, and I will have a look at this game because it clearly was the only game. I'm just going to look at this game on GChess, which went a bit wrong for me, and I want to find out where I went wrong. If something goes wrong in your own games, go and use GChess to try and work out where your mistake is. So we're going to go over there now. If you're going to leave the video at this moment, then thank you. I'm going to continue the speed run as we go along. and let's just go over to GChess. So GChess is, it's just gchess.com. Go and check it out. And if you want to support what I do, then this is a site which, if you subscribe to, you can, I think, very much help you. So I'm just going to do a bit of board adjusting as we're now in a different program, and I'm going to bring up the main tab here. At the moment, I must admit, GChess works a lot better on desktop compared to mobile. So this is your basic layout, and you've got these tabs here you can check from. But one of the really cool things, if I go to search games over here, I'm going to put the handle that I was using. I was playing on LiChess, so I don't need to put a chess.com handle in, and my handle was speedrun GingerGM. And now I'm going to pick the course that I want to check it from, and it was only a white opening, so we don't need to do that. So let's just put white opening in here, and I was going to play the Killer D4 DVD. So first of all, I'm just going to see if anything comes up when I search this, and let's just have a look. Did the game come up, the last game there? Knight c3, is this the one? Oh no, we still got Yabe there. Let's go back and try that again, shall we? I didn't update it. Oh, look at this, nice little videos coming out there. Okay, so what you got to do, you got to go chess handles. Let's try that again. Speedrun GingerGM. Oh, is that how you spell it? Looks funny. It's like okay, and then chess openings. We're doing it for white. Killer D4, perfect. And then what you need to do, you need to press this update button, which I failed to do. And the first time you ever update with a new handle, so if this is the first time you're doing it, it takes a bit longer to search, as it's getting all your games that you've played into the system. But after the first time that you've searched it, which probably takes 30 seconds to a minute, then you can see there's a little thing, it becomes a lot quicker. So here we go, and let's just search there, and we're going to this position. And who was my last opponent this game? Let's have a look, and we can see here, this is the very good thing. So we can see my opponent played bishop f5, and maybe I don't really cover this one. If you've got the GingerGM video, I'm going to play this now. And this is good. This is young me from 10 years ago, and maybe it will talk about bishop f5. You can link in your GingerGM videos to GChess. So let's just play the video, and it will time code it, hopefully, if bishop f5 was in the video. Let's just see what the video brings up first of all. Now, if we go to the position after knight to c3, there are a number of options here, and we're going to have a look at most of the options I can think are decent. Now, the main move we're going to concentrate on is knight to f6, because this is the main line, when white continues with knight to f3 and black plays pawn takes c4. Now, I consider this the main variation, so we'll come on to this later on in this chapter, but first of all we'll have a look at other possibilities that black has. Now, another very popular line that black can play instead of taking on c4 is pawn to a6, which has been popularised by a number of players. Bologan, I think, has made this very popular, and recently. So what I've gathered from that video is that, and this is quite interesting, that bishop f5 I did not cover in my Killer D4 DVD, which is understandable. Some moves you're just not going to have covered, and bishop f5 is quite a rare move. So let's just have a look now at the other tabs, because I want to get information on this. Now, if you want to go to the YouTube tab, you can go here. This is the YouTube tab, and we can search to see if there's any YouTube videos. Still no bishop f5, quite interesting. If we go to the encyclopedia, there's not even in the encyclopedia. So what we're working out is bishop f5 is really not a very well played, not a very commonly played game. This one is top game. So what are the top players who've played this? Well, we have someone here, Holden Hernandez, who's done it. Are there any white wins? Let's have a look. This is the top rated games. Well, there's one here, and let's just see. Well, in this game, if we load this one in, you can see the players here. They're not very high rated. I mean, they are, but they're not that high rated. And this knight to f3 move, well, it feels like black's improved the position by getting the bishop outside, and you can see even Peter Svidler has transposed to this position. So I don't think that's the way to play. So bishop f5. See, we're actually finding some quite interesting ideas. What's this e4 move? In this position, e4 played. Now, how does that work? That's the kind of aggressive move I'd love to play. Let's put on the engine and just see what the engine thinks. Well, the engine doesn't really understand this e4 otherwise. So what would happen if takes here? What is the idea? Okay, well now it's changed its mind and it's now showing that you can play this kind of idea and take the pawn. So this is one very interesting idea. I'm just going to look at online games, see if we have anything on online games here. And, well, okay, Nihal Sarin lost a game here. So what about Daniel Naroditsky? I always like seeing Daniel Naroditsky's way of playing. So Daniel, okay, this is good. So I found a game here where a top player now played the same idea as me. He took on d5. So if we remember how my game went, after pawn takes d5, it went queen b3. My opponent played knight c6 here, and we can keep looking at the any top games in this one. Who's the highest rated playing? 2400. So I think now this knight f3 move, which seemed very natural, and I'm just seeing someone else played e3 here, and the computer kind of likes e3. We've got to let the computer run a little bit. Maybe this is a safe way to play. But I can see that actually this opening idea that my opponent's played is actually quite interesting. It's quite an interesting opening idea. I'm surprised that no one plays it, because black does get a lot of play. Okay, so hang on a minute, the computer's now changing its mind. So I went knight f3, and then after e6, it did go like this. So I went queen takes here, and now after this one, maybe my bishop g5 is a really bad move. Okay, it's actually giving this as winning for white. So this is very useful. Are there any games? We'll go to a tab. Yeah, Yakon has had this very strong blitz player, and he beat another very strong Russian player, and he played the same as me, bishop g5. Quite funny. But the computer is indicating that e4 might be winning here. But I'm just having a look. Any YouTube videos here? No, this won't be an encyclopedia. But this move, according to the computer, is winning. Quite fascinating. So what happens if we take? I'm assuming just bishop b5. So okay, so I now know, and this is how you can improve as you go along. I now know that all my moves are pretty much okay in the game. That this was okay, this was okay. Bishop f5 is quite a peculiar move, but I now know that taking was the right way to do it. After this one, knight f3 was correct, and everything I did was correct. So I will play the same way again, but in this position, rather than playing bishop g5, if I just play e4, which is a temporary pawn sacrifice, but to bring the knight, bishop here, the knight here, I'm probably got a winning advantage, because you can see the computer gives this as a +2 advantage. So I now know that. If I wanted to save this PGN, I could do. We can save it down here, and I can just save it into one of my databases. And this is another very big advantage of GChess. You can create your own databases, so I can call this whatever I want. We can create a new folder. So I could say this is blitz improvements, or we can even say it's the early bishop f5 line. And you can create your own descriptions here when black brings the bishop out early. And if I save that, then we can see I've got a key game here, and I can always reference that database. We won't go into how you do that now, because I think we've had enough of this at the moment. But I can then access that database basically anywhere. So I can go on my phone, it will be saved to my phone, even if I've done it on my desktop. If I'm at a tournament on a train, I can look at all the files that I've built up from GChess. Anyway, there we go. So that is our little first speed run at this level. I'll continue doing this in future. Hope you like this video. We're trying to move up slowly, and we're trying to find the critical errors, the things that I think that came through there from my opponent not noticing our own plans. Again, key mistake. Not having a basic grip of opening ideas, playing unnecessary pawn weaknesses, playing too passively. That f6 move, you remember, that was a key example of that. Avoid these things, and trying to play the most critical line is always the right way to play if you can. Hence why I'm still not that unhappy with this queen move, even though my opponent had an opportunity to take advantage of it. And one more thing we could say, if you see a good move, my opponent took on b2, if you remember, but look for a better one. If my opponent had found the knight to b4 move there, probably losing, which would have been quite embarrassing. Thank you. Make sure you subscribe and like the channel, and I hope you'll find these free videos useful. Go and check out gchess.com. Cheers.